As of now, I would like us to stand and sing as we dismiss our children downstairs to Children's Church. Okay, I got it here. And heavenly armor will enter the land. The battle belongs to the Lord. No weapon that's fashioned against us will stand. The battle belongs to the Lord. And we sing glory, honor, power, and strength to the Lord. And we sing glory, honor, power, and strength to the Lord. When the power of darkness comes in like a flood, the battle belongs to the Lord. He's raised up a standard, the power of his blood. The battle belongs to the Lord. And we sing glory, honor, power, and strength to the Lord. And we sing glory, honor, power, and strength to the Lord. When your enemy presses in hard, do not fear. The battle belongs to the Lord. Take courage, my friend, your redemption is near. The battle belongs to the Lord. And we sing glory, honor, power, and strength to the Lord. And we sing glory, honor, power, and strength to the Lord. And we sing glory, honor, power, and strength to the Lord. And we sing glory, honor, power, and strength to the Lord. Now you may be seated.
Our scripture reading today will be from Matthew chapter 27, verses 19 through 23. That's Matthew 27, 19 through 23. While Pilate was sitting on the judge's seat, his wife sent him a message. It said, "Don't have anything to do with that man. He is not guilty. I have suffered a great deal in a dream today because of him." But the chief priests and the elders talked to the crowd and asking for Barabbas and having Jesus put to death. "Which of the two do you want me to set free?" asked the governor. "Barabbas," they answered. "Then what shall I do with Jesus, so-called the Christ?" Pilate asked. They all answered, "Crucify him." "Why? What wrong has he done?" asked Pilate. But they shouted even louder, "Crucify him."
All right. Well, welcome to the Sunday morning worship service. This is Grace Sunday, also known as Mistake Sunday. If anyone is perfect here, this is not the church for you. We make mistakes. We try to do it right, but sometimes we make mistakes. I appreciate Max filling in. Well, he's not really filling in. He does it every Sunday, but he just does it in tandem, and he's doing a great job. It is so difficult to get up here and stand before people, and you don't always smile. You know that, right? You look scary. And it sometimes rubs off on people who are standing up here. And then trying to work these slides, well, you know, technology, and adults. Now, if we had kindergartners, it would go smooth. But adults are difficult with technology. Anyway, we're doing our best. We're learning. We're talking about a man today who, although he never appears on center stage, Barabbas plays a huge role in the darkness. And we're focusing on something this morning that we don't often focus on. And so I want you to open your Bibles to the Gospels, because as I just looked at my remote, it wasn't coming up, so we may not have slides. Look, there they are. Never mind. I was way ahead of them. Well, we're focusing on a man who has been convicted. He has been condemned to die. And his cell is most likely in the fortress of Antonia. We'll look at that in just a moment. In the city of Jerusalem. And as he's there in the cell, I want you to use your imagination, if you will. I want you to picture him in his cell. And through the window or through the hallways, a sound is making its way down into where the cells, the prisoners are held. And what he hears is his name. Because there is a mob outside shouting, Barabbas! Barabbas! Give us Barabbas! And that's all he hears. He can only hear the mob. He can't hear the single voice of Pilate. He can only hear what the crowd is shouting out, and what he hears is his name. And the next thing he hears chills him to the bone. He has heard his name called out, and in his mind he goes no further than death by crucifixion. This is his end. This is how it all ends, right here in just the next little while. It'll be the end of the trail, and a torturous end at that. But for Barabbas, his life does not end on the cross. We know that. He doesn't. You see, the jailer who marches down the hallway and opens up his cell does not march him to a place of death. He opens the cell door and he says, "You're free to go." Can you imagine how life changes in an instant? From knowing absolutely with certainty you're about to die on a cross, death by crucifixion, but the jailer says, "You're free to go." Wouldn't you love to know what happened to Barabbas after he was freed? Did he stick around? Did he watch what happens? Or did he hightail it out of town for fear that they will arrest him again? Did he continue in his evil ways, yet escape any earthly punishment? Was he arrested afterwards for another crime? Was he killed committing some crime in the future? We don't know. All we know is if any man on this planet knew what it meant to have Jesus literally bear his cross and die in his place, it was Barabbas. Because literally that's what happens. Jesus carries the cross meant for Barabbas, dies on a cross meant for Barabbas. If asked to describe Barabbas, all of us could do it in probably one sentence. What would it be? The man who was set free and Jesus took his place. It would be something like that. The man who was, there was an exchange and he was let go and Jesus was taken into his place. Now, to appreciate the story, you have to understand a bit about the culture, the tradition of the day. Apparently, the Jewish people would approach the governor and say, "It's Passover, and traditionally you let one prisoner go every Passover. We request this year Aristobulus," or fill in a name, whoever it is. And every year they would ask for one prisoner. And every year Pilate would let that prisoner go to keep the people happy. Most of the time, no doubt, that custom was a thorn in the flesh to Pilate. He was anti-Semitic. He was a brutal governor. He was just a ruthless leader. But this time, he welcomed their request with a sigh of relief. First of all, for maybe the first time in his life, he is scared to death. He doesn't know what to do. He knows that the Jewish leaders have trumped up the charges against this Jesus because they're so jealous of his attracting the multitudes. And, well, the people could start a revolution. They could start rioting. They could do anything. So he's afraid. And secondly, his dilemma is he didn't believe Jesus was guilty. And he really doesn't want to crucify someone that is completely innocent. But the question remains, why of all the prisoners that were sitting in Roman cells did Pilate select Barabbas? Surely there were more than just him. Surely there were others that weren't the criminal that Barabbas was. Why not one of the two thieves scheduled to be crucified that day, one on either side of Jesus? Why not one of them? Well, Matthew 27 and verse 16 says, "And they were holding at that time a notorious prisoner called Barabbas." Notice that phrase, a notorious prisoner. Well, the word translated notorious comes from a word that means marked, or to mark something. So to borrow from that meaning of the Greek term, Barabbas was a marked man. He had been marked as something. More than just legend or supposition, the Jewish historian Josephus agrees with Matthew, stating that Barabbas was indeed a notorious criminal, and everyone knew him. He was well known. And that makes Pilate's choice of Barabbas logical. But what did he do? What else do we know about him? Well, we know that Mark chapter 15, beginning with verse 6, says this. "Now it was the custom at the festival to release a prisoner whom the people requested. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in the uprising." So Mark gives us a little bit more light on the situation. Often it's very helpful to compare the gospel writers when they're talking about the same thing. You'll get different information from each of them sometimes. Barabbas has been arrested. He's already been convicted of both insurrection and murder. Insurrection, he led an uprising. He led a revolt, a riot. And either in that or at some other time, he had also committed murder. So he's no petty thief. He's no petty pilferer. He is a criminal that is well known. And when Governor Pilate offers to the Jews his prisoner release program, he offers this dangerous rebel, a man of violence, a man of murder. Now I want you to focus in on his name for just a bit more. Barabbas is not this man's first name. You remember our old buddy Peter? Not our Simon Peter, but Peter in the Bible. Sometimes in the Gospels he's referred to as Simon Bar-Jonah or Simon the son of Jonah. Barabbas had a very common first name. He shared it with many other Jewish people, one that he even shared with a young carpenter from Nazareth. See, his first name was Jesus. In essence, Pilate is asking, which Jesus do you want? The innocent one or the very guilty one? Which one? You see, the zealot's complete name was Jesus Barabbas. And as a matter of fact, it's even noted in the footnotes of, if you have a good study Bible, it will tell you that down in the notes. Jesus Barabbas. And the Barabbas part of his name, well, that has some meaning as well. There are a couple of different ways you can translate that. Some scholars feel his name was probably Bar-Rabbas. Bar meaning son, Rabbi meaning teacher. He was the son of a teacher. Maybe even one of those that was in the crowd yelling, "Crucify him." So he was trying to put the people in as difficult a spot as he could. And if you don't translate it Bar-Rabbas, and by the way, typical preacher's kid, Bar-Rabbas, but you could also translate it Bar-Abbas. Bar meaning son, Abba meaning father. Someone's son, but probably with that name it was someone well known. Now, I know when you think of Barabbas, we've been so focused in on just a little bit that is written in Scripture, but through time and archaeology and looking at other writings, you get a fuller picture of who this man really is. The thinking is that Barabbas was the son of someone so famous and respected that people thought of him as father, someone connected politically or religiously. Well, we really don't know. All we can infer from this is Pilate was putting the people in a very difficult spot. And what we do know, this young Barabbas, he's not a nice man. He's one of the zealots. Those who want to get rid of get Rome out of Israel. And the zealots didn't care what it took. Murder, robbery, terrorism, doesn't matter. We just want to get rid of Rome. So two Jesuses, one who preached love, one who preached hate, one who preached peace, one who preached war, one who preached forgiveness, one who preached vengeance. Two Jesuses, different as night and day. And Pilate is asking, which Jesus do you want? Tradition says Barabbas followed the procession to the cross and stood there watching as Jesus was crucified. That would make some kind of sense, wouldn't it? He just took my place. I'm going to stick around and watch what happens to this guy. Now, we don't know if he did or not, but tradition says he did. After all, Barabbas knew that should have been him on the cross. And I wonder, did he make his way to the tomb when they buried him? Did he stick around and watch until he came out of that same tomb? Now, it was the custom at the festival to release a prisoner whom the people requested. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionist who had committed murder in the uprising. John chapter 18, beginning with verse 39, it's not on the screen, but it says, "You have a custom that I should release someone for you at the Passover. Do you wish then that I release for you the King of the Jews?" Therefore they cried out again, saying, "Not this man, but Barabbas." In other words, when he says, "Which Jesus do you want?" they say, not the Jesus who is our supposed king. We want the insurrectionist, the murderer Jesus. He was imprisoned most likely at the fortress of Antonia. If you look at that diagram of the temple, that's the temple grounds in the day of Jesus. The temple itself is that large building in the middle, not the one circled. That's the fortress of Antonia. That's where the temple guard was held. That's where this man most likely is held, right there. He's in some kind of a holding tank or prison for those that are about to be punished. Now, where is Pilate? Truth is, we're not exactly sure where Pilate was. He could have been staying at the Hasmonean Palace. However, when Herod Antipas was in town, he gets precedence, and he always stayed at the Hasmonean Palace. But John chapter 19, beginning with verse 12, tells us, as a result of this, Pilate made efforts to release him, but the Jews cried out, saying, "If you release this man, you are no friend of Caesar. Everyone who makes himself out to be a king opposes Caesar." When Pilate therefore heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat at a place called the Pavement, but in Hebrew, Gabbatha. This is the sixth and final trial of Jesus, and for this trial, Pilate brings Jesus out to a place called the Pavement. Now, where was this place, the Pavement? Well, it's located in relationship to where Barabbas is incarcerated, about 2,000 feet away, less than half a mile. That means he could have certainly heard the mob as they shouted out his name, but far enough away he could not hear Pilate as he spoke. This is a diagram of Jerusalem. The arrow that's pointing downwards, that's the temple. The other arrow that's pointed kind of at an angle, that's probably where Pilate was staying and probably where the Pavement was located. Picture Barabbas imprisoned in a cold cell in the fortress of Antonia, awaiting execution. He's pacing back and forth in his cell when he hears a mob shouting his name. From half a mile away, Barabbas could hear the mob shouting. But what he doesn't hear is, which of the two do you want me to release? Good Jesus or bad Jesus? He then hears his name, Barabbas, because they're shouting. Pilate says, what shall I do with Jesus who is called Christ? What do I do with the good Jesus then? What's the next thing Barabbas hears? Crucify him. Let him be crucified. Can you picture you're in that cell with him? Maybe it's your name you hear because in reality that's the way it is. We are the one deserving punishment. We are the ones deserving death by crucifixion. And maybe we hear our name. But what we don't hear is what's going on when our name isn't being shouted. And so his heart begins to pound, just like our heart would begin to pound as we hear our name. And this is no mob of zealous Jews coming to rescue him. He knows that for sure. This is a lynch party. He deserves death. And then he hears the measured tread of leather sandals slapping pavement. He hears them coming down the hallway. And he knows this is the end. That really is where we are. This is the end. But can you imagine his shock when the soldier opens the cell door and says, you're free to go? Barabbas, fully expecting the soldiers to come and take him to be crucified, suddenly finds himself a free man. Barabbas, more than any other individual in the dark drama of Calvary, knew, I have a substitute. Someone else is on my cross, taking my punishment. I'm supposed to be on that center cross. He was supposed to die that very day. Now, a number of legends have grown up around the character of Barabbas. They're just that. We don't really know. But I would like to think that Barabbas stayed in Jerusalem that day. Hung around, looked, watched, because he missed his cross. Another man literally took his place. That's called substitutionary atonement. And that's where we stand. The jailer came and said, you're free to go. Someone else is on your cross. We've been set free. I understand something of the feelings that Barabbas must have felt. I understand what it means to be set free from guilt and condemnation. So this morning we're about to sing a song of encouragement. And as we sing that song, I want you to consider that you're sitting in that cell. You're sitting in a cold stone dungeon of sin. And a voice calls out to you, and it's your name. And you hear, punish him, punish her. That's Satan. What you may not hear is Jesus saying, I'll take his place. I'll take her place. I'll pay the price for more than just Barabbas. I will go to the cross. I'll take the punishment. Can we assist you if your desire is to become a child of God this morning? Or if you already are, if there is something that you need us to be praying for or make confession of sin or whatever it is, request prayer, whatever. If it's private, go back to the office back here in this corner. If it's public, just come out here to the front. I'll welcome you and we'll talk about it for a minute and we'll pray for you or whatever is on your heart. Would you do that as we stand and as we sing?